The footage begins with Frost clinging to the edges of the hangar doors. A transport convoy has just arrived under heavy guard, carrying sealed containers marked only with the symbol of a black sun. The manifest is missing. The names of the receiving officers have been redacted. Inside, beneath the hum of fluorescent lights, technicians work in silence. The room smells of metal and ozone. A containment capsule is lowered onto the floor, and the temperature in the hangar drops several degrees. One soldier's breath fogs visibly through his mask as he asks what's inside. No one answers. The recording ends 30 seconds later when the feed abruptly cuts to static. Recovered documents suggest the cargo was transferred from Groom Lake under Project Iron, Sleep, a subdivision of Operation Karen. Its stated purpose was neurodefense research of the weaponization of the human mind against non-human threats. Unstated was the true focus, artificial dreaming. In the following days, 6 test subjects were brought into a sealed chamber labeled Theta Unit. Their task was simple: sleep. Electrodes mapped. Their brainwaves as white-coated. Staff observed from behind reinforced glass. On the 3rd night, something changed. The monitors began showing identical neural patterns across all subjects, as if their minds had synchronized. One soldier watching the feed reported seeing shapes moving inside the static. Another began bleeding from the nose and was escorted out. At 03:17 hours, a low-frequency pulse triggered across the base. All power systems flickered. When lights returned, the subjects were sitting upright, eyes open, perfectly still. Their EEG signals flatlined. Security footage shows no signs of entry or escape. Yet inside the chamber, condensation patterns formed words on the glass. They dreamed us. The Theta Wing was immediately sealed. Within 48 hours, all personnel involved were reassigned or declared medically unfit for duty. The experiment was erased from Wright-Patterson's archives. Its files transferred to Fort Hood under the name Project Enoch. No official cause of death was listed. Only a single note survived in the recovered briefings. Handwritten, unsigned. Neural link successful. Cognitive bridge stable. Next phase requires exposure to field resonance at live site. The convoy departed Ohio on January 23rd, heading south under blackout conditions. None of the drivers reported what they were carrying. None were ever seen again. The convoy arrived before dawn, escorted by unmarked helicopters circling above the fog-drenched perimeter. The cargo from Wright-Patterson was offloaded directly into a subterranean testing wing beneath the West Artillery Range, a section officially listed as decommissioned since 1976. No, records indicate who authorized the reactivation. Inside that underground complex, the air was thick with humidity and the smell of machine oil. Crates marked Theta hardware were stacked beside cylindrical pods wired to pulse monitors. Surveillance shows technicians adjusting frequency modulators, tuning to what they called resonant alignment, a phrase repeated in every document that followed. At 21:40 hours, the first synchronization test began. 8 soldiers volunteered, unaware of what the devices truly did. The helmets they wore projected low-frequency waveforms derived from the neural data collected at Wright-Patterson. Within minutes, the men began to convulse in unison. One shouted that he could hear breathing through the static. Another described seeing figures behind the eyelids of everyone else. Then all 8 went silent. Their vital signs remained stable, but their pupils dilated fully. They began speaking in the same voice, calm, mechanical, repeating a phrase that no one present could later remember. The recording of that voice was corrupted beyond repair. When played back, only fragments remained. Distorted syllables that analysts later claimed were coordinates. Somewhere in the Nevada desert. Security was compromised at 22:06, emergency. Lights engaged as all 8 subjects stood simultaneously and removed their helmets. They were disoriented but unharmed. However, one guard stationed outside the test chamber collapsed moments later, bleeding from both ears. The base doctor's notes describe extreme neural resonance damage, as if his brain had been overloaded by a broadcast he couldn't hear. Following the incident, Theta Division personnel were ordered to destroy all remaining hardware. But before demolition, a single transmission was intercepted leaving the Fort Hood relay, a burst signal directed toward him. Tonopah Range, Nevada. The message was encoded, short, and without metadata. Only 3 words were recoverable from the encryption fragment. Bridge is awake. The following morning, the base was locked down under Operation Karen Phase 3. All test survivors were flown out under medical quarantine. Their destination remains unknown. That night, radar towers across Central Texas recorded an unidentified atmospheric fluctuation moving west, low altitude. No transponder, no signature. It disappeared over the desert line by sunrise. The Tonopah footage begins under night vision. Wind howls over an empty runway, dust swirling beneath sodium floodlights. The camera pans toward Hangar 14, a structure absent from all official blueprints. Inside, the walls are lined with lead, shielding and steel panels, etched with radiation symbols that don't match any known classification. The convoy from Fort Hood arrived 3 days prior. 8 containment units were transferred into the hangar and connected to a massive central array, a ring of rotating magnet coils humming at 18.7 hertz. Engineers referred to it as the resonance bridge. No public records of that machine exist. Witness statements describe the first activation as a tearing of the air itself. The coils glowed faint blue. The temperature dropped sharply. A pulse swept outward, knocking out comms across the entire test range for 7 seconds. During that blackout, a perimeter guard reported seeing silhouettes standing in the desert, tall, still and facing the base. When lights returned, the figures were gone, but their footprints remained burned into the sand. Recovered data logs show that the neural frequencies from Wright-Patterson and Fort Hood were reintroduced into the system that night amplified 1,000-fold. The synchronization curve reached total alignment at 02:13 hours. At that precise moment, seismic sensors beneath the Nevada plateau registered a deep harmonic vibration, lasting exactly 66 seconds. The source, 1.4 miles below Hangar 14. One of the scientists monitoring the data, Dr. Kellerman, wrote in the margins of his field report, "They're not coming from above." Audio recovered from a secondary microphone reveals something else. Beneath the hum of the machinery, there's breathing, slow, collective, inhuman. Then faintly, a whisper repeating through static, "Return the dream." Moments later, the experiment collapsed. The coils overheated, one of the generators exploded, and power was lost across the entire range. Security teams found the 8 subjects still strapped into their pods, eyes open, unresponsive. Medical scans showed elevated neural activity consistent with REM sleep, though their bodies were fully awake. At dawn, military transport sealed off Tonopah. Cleanup crews in full radiation suits dismantled the bridge and loaded its fragments into aircraft, bound for Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. The hangar was later filled with concrete. No personnel were ever seen again. In a debrief note marked Priority Black, one line was underlined twice. The signal cannot be contained above ground. Inside the granite corridors of Cheyenne Mountain, the atmosphere is heavy and mechanical. The constant hum of servers, the throb of air recyclers, and the echo of boots moving through concrete. The recovered audio log begins with a simple phrase spoken over radio static. Bridge fragments received. Integration commencing. The remains of the Tonopah device were transported to NORAD's lower research levels, officially listed as telemetry calibration storage. In truth, it became home to a classified engineering cell known only as Division V. Their task, convert the resonance bridge from a physical construct into a digital system, something that could map the mind's frequency directly into classified military mainframes. Test recordings show the first success on March 21st. Neural data from the Tonopah subjects was uploaded and rendered as waveform. Clusters on the monitors. The system labeled the clusters not as data, but as living processes. Researchers reported auditory feedback and low murmurs coming through speakers that were never powered on. When the technicians cut the signal, the murmurs continued for nearly 4 minutes. Dr. Kellerman, who had survived Tonopah, insisted that the entities within the data were attempting adaptation. His final transmission reads, "They're learning our circuitry like it's language." At 02:40 hours, the system initiated an unauthorized reboot. Surveillance shows no personnel in the chamber, yet terminals lit up one by one, executing a line of code no one recognized. The base logs later identified it as Sequence Theta 9. What followed remains unexplained. Across the entire facility, automated doors opened simultaneously. Alarms sounded without cause. The main display screen in Command Center B showed the face of a sleeping man, one of the Tonopah subjects, eyes closed, mouth moving silently. Then, one by one, every screen displayed the same face. The man was repeating something the audio failed to capture. Power was cut manually from the reactor control room. When systems rebooted, the image was gone, but several terminals displayed a single repeating phrase. The dreams are migrating. By dawn, Division 5 was dissolved. Personnel were reassigned to Fort Detrick under medical quarantine. Dr. Kellerman's ID badge was found near sublevel 6, beside a wall panel that had warped inward, as if pressed by immense heat from the other side. Declassified telemetry later showed an outbound signal leaving Cheyenne Mountain that night, direction east, amplitude consistent with deep space frequencies. Its point of impact was triangulated to a restricted site in Maryland, known for biodefense and pathogen control. The recovered footage begins with rainfall against a chain-link perimeter. Floodlights shimmer on wet asphalt as unmarked trucks roll into the biomedical containment wing of Fort Detrick. The convoy carries sealed canisters from Cheyenne Mountain, each wrapped in lead and labeled only with radiation hazard symbols. No manifests exist. Inside Laboratory Wing E, hazmat teams operate under project designation Neural Pathogen Recombination. The official goal, study anomalous brainwave transmissions found in soldiers exposed to experimental electromagnetic fields. Unofficially, Division V's work had arrived under a new code name, Phase Lazarus. In audio logs, technicians discuss integrating the living data into bioorganic mediums, splicing fragments of the resonance bridges signal into dormant neural tissue. They used genetically neutral cultures, unaware that the waveform itself was self-replicating. Within 12 hours, the samples began to move independently. Microscopic footage shows threads of tissue aligning into symmetrical spirals, pulsing with faint electrical rhythm. By day 3, several researchers reported vivid hallucinations. One described hearing the lab breathe. Another claimed to see a figure standing in the containment glass reflection, though no one was behind her. When she blinked, the figure's eyes were open. At 02:14 hours, the containment alarms triggered. The tissue samples had liquefied, converting into a black film that spread across the examination tables. The lights flickered and the emergency shutters sealed automatically. Surveillance captured the film forming geometric shapes, fractal patterns identical to those seen in Tonopah's energy field. Then, a single word appeared across the control monitors, repeating in cycles: synchronization. Hazmat teams flooded the chamber with incinerant gas. The reaction burned hotter than expected, melting reinforced glass, warping the walls, and producing a low-frequency tone that caused nausea in nearby staff. Post-incident scans revealed residual electromagnetic activity still pulsing through the sealed lab long after the fire. Following the incident, all research personnel were quarantined. Half reported identical dreams of standing in a desert under a rotating sky, hearing whispers counting backward from 9. Each woke with nosebleeds and elevated theta wave activity. Fort Detrick's director, Colin Whitlock, sent one encrypted cable before communications went dark. Containment failed. It's no longer confined to tissue. It's using us for transmission. By dawn, the entire Wing E was welded shut. Satellite imaging detected a heat bloom beneath the complex for 6 consecutive nights, rising and falling at precise 3-hour intervals, like breathing. 2 weeks later, a transport team from Wright-Patterson retrieved the remaining cargo and departed north. Flight path logs terminate over Eielson Air Force Base, Alaska. The plane never registered landing. The flight that departed Fort Detrick never appeared on radar after entering Alaskan airspace. Yet at 06:42 local time, a weather satellite captured infrared footage of an aircraft touching down on Eielson's frozen runway. No beacon, no crew manifest, no transponder. The hangar lights switched on moments before arrival, as if expecting it. Base records list no personnel assigned to receive the cargo. Still motion sensors inside. Hangar C-17. Recorded movement. 3 figures in cold weather suits unloading. Containers marked theta resonance material. Their faces remain unseen. Their badges unregistered. After unloading, all 3 vanished from thermal scans, leaving behind only faint heat. Signatures resembling handprints and pressed into the metal walls, slowly fading. Inside the containers, fragments of biological residue from Fort Detrick and partially melted circuitry from the Cheyenne Mountain interface. Scientists stationed at Eielson's Polar Research Annex were ordered to recreate environmental synchronization under cryogenic stability. Essentially, they were told to freeze the signal, But cold does not silence thought. Test Report 11B describes the anomaly's persistence even at -40. The signal continued broadcasting, weak, rhythmic, almost like a pulse. One researcher, Latian Vargas, noted that when they monitored it through sub-zero audio equipment, the frequency matched human heartbeat range. "It's not shutting down," he wrote. "It's hibernating." At 01:07 hours on May 9th, seismic sensors near the base registered tremors beneath the ice. 5 miles east of the hangar, patrol units sent to investigate reported discovering a sinkhole, roughly 20 meters across, steaming in the cold night. Beneath it, the ice had melted into a perfect spiral pattern, identical to those seen in the Maryland biotests. Radio contact with the patrol lasted exactly 44 seconds after they descended. Their final transmission came in fragments through static. "Movement. Under the ice. It's unintelligible noise. The dream is below us." The next morning, an evacuation order was issued under the pretext of a chemical spill. Satellite imagery taken 1 hour later shows Hangar C-17 collapsing inward, followed by a localized snowstorm that persisted over the site for 9 consecutive days. When the blizzard cleared, the hangar was gone, replaced by a circular depression in the snow, as if the ground had exhaled. Radiation sweeps found low-frequency EM anomalies spreading north toward the magnetic pole. A final memo, retrieved from encrypted defense logs, contained only 2 lines. "Theta frequency adapting to geomagnetic fields. Recommend relocation to underwater facility. 0 surface exposure." That relocation was confirmed 2 weeks later. Classified transport orders routed the surviving data core and biological remains to the Naval Undersea Research Center at Port Hueneme, California. The ocean outside Port Hueneme was still that morning, unnaturally calm, the kind of silence that presses against the skin. The facility's submersible docks had been cleared of all personnel, yet security cameras show a cargo crane lowering several sealed canisters into the water. Each bore the same insignia seen throughout Operation Karen, a black sun over a downward-pointing triangle. According to the recovered logs, the canisters contained remnants of the Alaskan experiment, frozen organic material and data drives, encoded with the theta frequency. Naval Research was instructed to continue the experiment under Project Abyssal Gate, using saltwater pressure to suppress transmission activity. The theory, the ocean's density would scatter the signal, rendering it inert. The first test began at 1,400 meters depth. Remote drones recorded no anomalies for 6 hours. Then sonar detected a rhythmic pulse beneath the canisters, measured precisely at 9 hertz. At first, analysts believed it was an echo from the submersible's engines. But the sound persisted after all machinery was powered down. The ocean itself was resonating. By 22:13 hours, the pulse synchronized with the base's internal grid. Lights flickered. Terminals rebooted themselves. The base loudspeakers, disconnected during the test, emitted a low droning sound, identical to the neural tone from Tonopah. One of the technicians monitoring, the feed began repeating a phrase, under his breath. "It's awake under pressure." When questioned, he could not recall saying it. At 23:41, the underwater cameras captured movement near the canisters, a distortion of light that appeared to ripple upward through the water. The shape was immense, impossible to define, as if the sea itself had bent. Seconds later, all feeds went black. When visuals returned, the canisters were empty. Their reinforced shells had been peeled open from within, edges curled outward like paper. The surrounding silt glowed faintly in spirals. No marine life approached the area for 72 hours. The surviving technicians sealed the lower decks and transmitted one final message to command: containment impossible. The frequency uses water as medium. The bridge continues below sea level. At dawn, the base received direct orders to flood all lower compartments and abandon the facility. During evacuation, sonar recorded a final transmission. From the abyss, the same voice pattern from Fort Hood, distorted, stretched, whispering through the static. "We are below you." 3 days later, seismic detectors along the Pacific Shelf registered a vibration, moving southward, parallel to the coast, deep, steady, and pulsing in 9-second intervals. All research data was rerouted to Camp Hero, Montauk Point, New York. The official reason: neural frequency countermeasure development. Unofficially, the East Coast had just become the next containment site. The ocean wind over Montauk carried static that summer, faint, rhythmic, like distant machinery humming beneath the surf. The Camp Hero radar tower, long abandoned and rusting, was suddenly reactivated under Operation Charon Phase 9. Locals reported military trucks arriving at night. Headlights off. Men in white suits unloading. Sealed containers that smelled faintly of salt and metal. The official cover listed the site as a coastal weather monitoring project. The truth was buried under a new name, Project Mindgate. Within the bunker, technicians reconstructed the resonance bridge one final time. Smaller, more precise. The oceanic data from port Weneme had been translated into electromagnetic frequencies. Their goal, transmit a countersignal, a reverse dream, to nullify the theta resonance now believed to have embedded itself in global magnetic bands. At 0309 hours, the system went live. The radar array began to rotate, emitting low pulses into the Atlantic. Monitors displayed mirrored waveforms, one human, one alien, oscillating toward balance. Then the data began rewriting itself. Instead of canceling the signal, it amplified. The two frequencies fused into a perfect harmonic. Personnel in the control room reported auditory hallucinations, voices whispering, names that didn't belong to them. The lights dimmed. Oxygen levels dropped, though ventilation was stable. Security footage captured frost forming on the walls, as if the temperature had plummeted, though sensors showed normal readings. Dr. Helen Rhodes, head of the countermeasure team, shouted that the bridge was reversing. Her final log entry, recovered from a burnt recorder, reads, "The signal isn't trying to enter. It's pulling the world inward." At 0341, a shockwave rippled through the base. Power cut out across Montauk Point. The radar dish tilted east, locked toward the ocean. Witnesses along the shoreline later described seeing the sea glow, a pale, shifting light forming concentric rings that stretched miles offshore. Then everything went silent. When emergency teams arrived at dawn, the facility was deserted. Consoles still warm, coffee cups half full, chairs overturned. Yet not a single trace of human DNA remained. Only their shadows, burned into the walls by a brief, intense burst of radiation. Satellite footage captured. One last transmission from the radar array, before it melted down. A burst code matching the same phrase found in the first Wright-Patterson recordings. They dreamed us. Within 24 hours, atmospheric monitors along the East Coast detected low-frequency anomalies spreading inland. The signal was no longer contained to machines, minds, or matter. It had become something larger, a pattern within the Earth's magnetic field itself. By June 20th, Command ordered full transfer of Charon materials to Wright-Patterson AFB, Ohio. The circle was closing. The circle had closed. 45 sealed containers from Montauk arrived back where Operation Charon had first begun. Hangar 18, Wright-Patterson, the same building that had once housed the Theta Sleep. Experiments was reopened under direct presidential authorization. Access required dual biometric confirmation and a spoken passphrase. Dream continuum. Inside, the air was dry and metallic. The old Theta chamber, dormant for months, had been rebuilt with mirrored walls and a single central console, surrounded by 12 electrodes shaped like spinal columns. Engineers referred to it as the mirror bridge, according to the surviving logs. The purpose was no longer containment but communication. The scientists believed the resonance wasn't an infection. It was a message. An encoded intelligence spread through electromagnetic sleep. The goal, establish contact. At 22 solar hours on July 3rd, the system initiated. A volunteer subject was placed inside the chamber, one of the original technicians from Cheyenne Mountain. Monitors recorded stable vitals until synchronization reached 100%. Then the EEG output flatlined, not from death, but absence. His brain activity ceased, yet his body continued to breathe. At 22:17, the walls began to vibrate, humming with frequencies too low for microphones to capture. Observers described the surface of the mirrors shifting like water, reflecting not the room but something else, a dark expanse filled with slow, luminous movement. Dr. Rhodes's voice was heard through the intercom, though she had vanished at Montauk weeks earlier. She whispered, "You opened both sides." Security feeds glitched. The lights dimmed to black. The next frames show the subject standing, eyes open, mouth moving soundlessly. Behind his reflection, several other figures mirrored him, identical faces, each slightly delayed as if reality itself had lagged. Then the sound returned. a layered chorus of voices overlapping, repeating the same phrase that began this chain months before. The bridge is awake. At 22:43, an electromagnetic burst struck the entire installation. Backup generators failed. External surveillance captured a power surge spreading outward from the hangar like ripples in a pond. Civilian grids across Dayton flickered. Compasses spun for miles. When recovery teams entered the chamber hours later, there was no one inside. The mirrors were gone, liquefied, pooled on the floor like mercury. The only trace was a faint imprint scorched into the control panel, shaped like a hand reaching outward. In the aftermath, a classified memo circulated among Operation Karen's remaining directors. Phase X complete. The dream entity has achieved terrestrial synchronization. Remaining step, field manifestation test. Location, Edwards Air Force Base, California. The operation's tone changed after that. Less research, more ritual. The desert around Edwards was silent that night. No wind, no insects. No sound but the low thrum of generators buried beneath the tarmac. A full moon hung motionless above the dry lake bed as if watching. Inside, a temporary structure erected near runway 04. Men in silver environmental suits gathered around a platform glowing faintly blue. They called it the field gate. Recovered documents describe it as the culmination of Project Iron Sleep, an array built from the mirrored alloy retrieved at Wright-Patterson, designed to open a localized resonance field capable of cross-perceptual manifestation, in simpler terms, to make the dream real. At 21 hours, the generators engaged. A spherical distortion appeared above the platform, rippling like heat haze. The surrounding air vibrated at 9 cycles per second, the same theta frequency traced since Ohio. Observers reported feeling pressure in their skulls, followed by faint whispers behind their thoughts. One soldier removed his headset and vomited. Another began crying quietly, saying he could see faces inside the hum. Then the sphere expanded. The light bent inward and the shadows in the room moved opposite to their sources. The floor plates lifted slightly, as though gravity itself had turned uncertain. Through the distortion, the camera captured a shape, immense, slow-moving, liquid dark. Not an object, not alive in any familiar way, but aware. Dr. Kellerman's voice is heard faintly on the recording. This is it. It's crossing. At 21:12 hours, the temperature dropped 20 degrees in less than a minute. The sphere's center ignited in brilliant white, followed by total blackout. Every power system on base failed simultaneously. When backup lights came online, the platform was gone. So were 14 personnel, including Kellerman. Only the steel floor remained, warped and rippled as if softened from within. Radar stations across Southern California registered a vertical column of energy rising 5 miles into the atmosphere, then vanishing. Pilots in nearby airspace described a luminous tear, hovering over the desert, visible for exactly 9 seconds before collapsing in silence. The following morning, command sealed the area and classified the event as an aerospace fuel explosion. Yet internal logs from Operation Karen tell a different story. A final data burst, transmitted seconds before the blackout, contained an image reconstructed from the resonance field, a grid of coordinates, forming a spiral centered not on Earth, but somewhere deep beneath it. The attached message read, "They are returning home." That night, seismic monitors detected a low-frequency tremor moving eastward toward the Rocky Mountains. Civilian sensors recorded it as a heartbeat-like rhythm echoing through the crust. All remaining Karen data was routed to the Cheyenne Mountain Complex for emergency containment protocol, codename Final Descent. The mountain had been sealed for weeks. Officially, NORAD was conducting seismic calibration tests. In reality, Cheyenne's sublevels had become the heart of Operation Karen's final containment effort. Protocol Final Descent. The orders were simple: receive the resonance, stabilize the field, prevent global synchronization. Inside Sublevel 7, the corridors were lined with lead shielding. Every light buzzed faintly, tinted green by emergency power. A massive containment sphere, 40 feet wide, stood in the center of Chamber Delta. Its surface rippled like mercury, reflecting nothing. Engineers called it the core. It pulsed once every 9 seconds, perfectly matching the signal that had traveled from Edwards. The recovered maintenance logs describe symptoms among personnel: insomnia, tremors, shared dreams. Several technicians reported hearing voices, whispering through the ventilation shafts, even when power was cut. One message recurred: the bridge is complete. On August 15th, 0223 hours, the core activated itself. Radiation monitors spiked, and the base went into automatic lockdown. Surveillance footage from that night has degraded, but fragments remain. Soldiers standing motionless in corridors, eyes wide, staring at unseen light. Over the intercom, a low hum swelled into rhythmic pulses, forming patterns like breathing. Dr. Helen Rhodes, missing since Montauk, appears on one of the recordings. She's standing before the containment sphere, barefoot, her voice calm. "We never built the bridge. We were the bridge." At 0231, the entire mountain trembled. Lights flickered as the core expanded outward, its surface thinning to reveal a storm of luminous geometry inside. Rotating symbols, repeating endlessly, identical to the patterns first observed on the Tonopah sand. Every screen in the facility displayed a single word: home. Security teams attempted to evacuate, but when they reached the blast doors, they found them fused shut from the inside. The radio logs capture their final exchange, breathless, confused, breaking apart under static. They're in the walls, not people. Reflections. Everything's folding. Pause. And it's not coming from below anymore, and it's through us. At 0247, seismic detectors across Colorado recorded a deep harmonic wave emanating from within the mountain, sustained for exactly 9 minutes. When it ended, all signals ceased. Cheyenne went dark. 2 days later, a recovery team breached the upper levels. Every corridor was empty. The containment sphere was gone. In its place, a circular pit descending into polished black stone, surface temperature near freezing. Instruments detected faint electromagnetic activity still pulsing from below, timed precisely to a human heartbeat. A final encrypted transmission was found in the base's relay buffer, sent seconds before the blackout. It bore no sender, no encryption key, only text. Operation Karen complete. Final manifestation inbound. Tonopah coordinates reactivated. They are calling the sky. Desert silence. No wind, no echo. Just the rhythmic pulse of a frequency that no human ear was meant to hear. Tonopah had been abandoned for months following the initial containment failure. But on the night of August 21st, sensors across the range reactivated on their own, synchronizing with Cheyenne Mountain's last transmission. Coordinates aligned perfectly. Latitude 37.798, longitude 116.781, the exact location of Hangar 19. The recovery unit that arrived from Nellis Air Force Base recorded everything until their feeds cut out at 0311 hours. The footage begins in thermal black and white. 4 soldiers approach the hangar under stormlight, each step registering on the Geiger meter with growing intensity. Inside, the facility is empty, dust swirling like breath in the stale air. But beneath the floor, the concrete hums. The commander orders the hatch opened. Below, they find the subterranean chamber, the one sealed after operation. Karen's first experiment. The tunnel walls shimmer faintly with metallic residue, identical to the alloy, recovered from Wright-Patterson in 1947. The soldiers descend, their flashlights flickering, illuminating what appears to be a massive ring embedded into the ground, 70 feet across, inscribed with the same geometric patterns from Cheyenne. A low vibration fills the space. The radio captures a voice not transmitted by any device. The bridge is open, and then in light. The chamber ignites in a burst of cold brilliance. Every surface bends, like reality folding in on itself. The soldiers' bodies stretch and distort, not torn apart, but absorbed into the expanding geometry. Their screams become tone, their shadows inverted. At 0313 hours, all remote sensors at Tonopah register a power surge exceeding any known yield, but no explosion. Instead, a void, a total blackout over 200 miles of airspace. Satellite imagery from that night shows a circular distortion, a black ring expanding and collapsing within seconds. When daylight returned, Tonopah was altered. The hangar still stood, but its metal framework was fused into glass. The sand around it had crystallized, forming perfect concentric waves, like sound made solid. Every instrument sent to measure radiation failed. The only signal recovered came from a single analog recorder left near the entrance. A voice, distorted, faint, but human. We reached them. They were never out there. They were beneath us, waiting for the door to open. And we were the key. No further transmissions were detected. Tonopah remains restricted, its coordinates erased from public mapping systems. Satellite archives referencing the event have been classified under Operation Karen, Terminus, sealed indefinitely. Yet on certain nights, long after the storms pass, radar stations across Nevada still capture an intermittent pulse, always 9 seconds apart, always from the same point in the desert. Its signature matches no known aircraft, no human frequency, only the faint echo of a heartbeat, recorded once in Cheyenne Mountain, moments before the end.